Dr. Vexhari stood before the great council chamber, his forearms moving in perfect rhythm as he presented his data. A massive hall held representatives from 12 different alien species, all watching the tall, blue-skinned scientist with interest. His research had taken 3 years to complete, and today he would share his most important finding. "Honored council members," Vexhari began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's translation systems. "I have studied the humans for many cycles now. I have examined their bodies, their minds, and their technology. My conclusion is simple and clear." He pressed a control, and a holographic image of a frozen world appeared above the council floor. The planet looked like a giant ball of white and blue ice spinning slowly in the dark space. "This is Arcturus 7, he continued, the planet we discovered last year. Surface temperature stays at minus 180 degrees. Ice storms can freeze metal in minutes. The atmosphere will kill most life forms in seconds." Murmurs filled the chamber. Several council members leaned forward in their seats. "3 species have tried to build colonies on similar ice planets," Vexhari said. "The Zephyrian Empire used their best thermal technology. They lasted 6 weeks before retreating. The Crystalline Collective, who are made of silicon and can handle cold naturally, gave up after 3 months. The metal-bodied mechanoids couldn't even land safely. The hologram changed to show charts and graphs. Red lines moved across the display, showing failure rates and survival times. Now the humans want to try, Vexhari announced. But they will fail faster than all the others. A deep voice came from the council floor. "Explain your reasoning." "Doctor." "Gladly," Vexhari replied. "Humans are soft-bodied creatures. Their skin is thin. Their bones break easily. They need constant warmth to survive. On Earth, they die if their body temperature drops just a few degrees." More charts appeared in the air. These showed human anatomy, highlighting weak points and limitations. Their technology is primitive compared to the Zephyrians. Their bodies are weaker than the Crystalline Collective. They have no natural resistance to extreme cold like the ice dwellers of Proxima Station. Vexhari paused for effect, looking around the chamber. But worst of all, humans are emotionally unstable. When faced with real danger, they panic. They make poor decisions. They fight among themselves instead of working together. My calculations show they will abandon their mission within 2 weeks. The chamber fell silent. Finally, the council leader spoke. "Your research will be noted, Doctor. We will observe this human attempt with great interest." Vexhari bowed his head. "Thank you, honored leader. I only hope they listen to reason before too many of them die." 3 days later, on Earth, Commander. Jake Morrison sat in a meeting room at Space Command headquarters. The walls were covered with maps of star systems and photos of distant planets. Jake was 35 years old, with short brown hair and calm blue eyes. He had led missions to Mars, Europa, and the asteroid belt, but nothing like this. "Your mission is simple in concept, difficult in execution," General Harris explained. "Establish a permanent human settlement on Arcturus 7. Prove that we can. Survive on ice planets." Jake studied the mission files spread across the table. The planet looked deadly even in the photographs. "Sir, I've read Dr. Vexhari's report. He thinks we'll fail." "That's exactly why we're going," the general replied. "Every species in the galaxy thinks humans are too weak for the hard jobs. Time to prove them wrong." Jake nodded. "What's my team?" "Size? 5 total, including you. I've selected the best people for this job." The general handed Jake 4 personnel files. Amy Rodriguez, engineer. She's 28, from Texas. Built survival systems for the lunar colonies. If anyone can keep you alive in the cold, it's her. Jake opened the first file. Amy's photo showed a woman with dark hair, pulled back in a ponytail, and intelligent brown eyes. Ben Carter, geologist, 31 years old, from Colorado. Spent 2 years studying ice formations in Antarctica. He knows cold weather and mineral extraction. The second file showed a tall man with blonde hair and a friendly smile. Sophie Lane, medical officer, 26, from Minnesota. Trained in emergency medicine and cold weather injuries. Also trained in psychology to help with team morale. Sophie's photo revealed a young woman with red hair and green eyes that looked both kind and determined. Ryan Walsh, communications specialist, 29, from Maine. Can build radio systems from spare parts. Kept contact working during the Europa emergency 3 years ago. The last file showed a man with black hair and serious dark eyes. They're all single, no family ties to worry about, the general added. And they all volunteered after reading Vexhari's report. Jake looked up in surprise. They volunteered after reading that we're going to fail? Amy said she wanted to prove. Aliens don't understand human engineering. Ben said cold planets probably have the best mineral deposits. Sophie said the medical challenges sounded interesting. Ryan said he likes impossible communication problems. Jake smiled for the first time since entering the room. When do we leave? 2 months. Ship is being prepared now. The new Frontier, our newest long-range vessel. And if Vexhari is right, if we can't survive? General Harris stood up. Ben will die trying, and the next team will learn from our mistakes. That's the human way, Commander. Jake gathered the files and stood as well. Yes, sir. We'll do our best. I know you will. Oh, and Jake? Yes, sir. Dr. Vexhari has asked permission to monitor your mission. He wants to document the failure for his research. Jake's smile grew wider. Tell him he's welcome to watch. Should be educational for him. As Jake left the meeting room, he thought about his team and the impossible mission ahead. The alien scientist was probably right about one thing. This would be the hardest challenge humans had ever faced. But Vexhari might be wrong about the outcome. God, after all, humans had always been good at doing things that everyone said were impossible. The new Frontier dropped out of hyperspace with a shudder that Jake felt in his bones. Through the ship's main window, Arcturus 7 filled their view like a giant white marble. No brown continents or blue oceans broke the endless expanse of ice and snow. Even from space, the planet looked cold and unwelcoming. Atmospheric readings coming in now, Ryan called from his station. Temperature is minus 178 degrees. Wind speeds up to 200 miles per hour. And there's a massive storm system covering half the southern continent. Amy looked up from her engineering console. Our landing site is in the northern hemisphere, away from the worst weather. Should give us a better chance to set up. Should being the key word, Ben muttered, studying his geological scans. The mineral readings are interesting, though. Lots of rare metals under all that ice. Sophie checked her medical equipment one more time. Everyone remembered to stay in groups. Frostbite can happen in minutes at these temperatures. And watch for signs of altitude sickness. The atmosphere is thinner than Earth normal. Jake nodded to his team. All right, people, we've trained for this. Let's show the galaxy what humans can do. The landing was rough. Ice crystals in the atmosphere made the ship shake and groan as they descended. When they finally touched down, the new Frontier's hull immediately began crackling as the extreme cold hit the metal. Well, we're here, Jake announced. Time to make history. The first surprise came within an hour. Amy was setting up the main heating unit for their temporary shelter when it simply stopped working. She ran diagnostics, checked connections, and tried backup systems. Nothing worked. The heating coils are designed for cold weather, she explained to Jake, her breath visible, even inside the ship. But not this cold. The metal is becoming brittle. Some of the electronic components are freezing solid. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. How long can we survive without main heat? With our backup systems and body warmth? Maybe 6 hours before we start getting real problems. Outside, the wind howled like a living thing. Ice particles hit the ship's hull with sounds like machine gun fire. Through the small windows, they could see nothing but white darkness. Ryan tried to establish communication with Earth, but his equipment gave him trouble from the start. The cold is affecting the signal processors, he reported. And there's some kind of interference from the planet's magnetic field. I can barely get a signal out past the atmosphere. Ben attempted to take soil samples, but his drilling equipment froze solid after 20 minutes of exposure. The ground is harder than concrete, he told the team, and my equipment isn't handling the temperature changes. When I bring it inside to warm up, condensation forms and then freezes in the circuits. Sophie treated their first casualties before they'd been on the planet for 4 hours. Jake's exposed face got frostbite during a 10-minute equipment check outside. Amy's fingers turned white after working on repairs without proper gloves. Both recovered quickly, but it was a warning of how dangerous their situation was. That night, huddled in sleeping bags inside the ship with only emergency heating, Jake wondered if Dr. Vexhari had been right after all. The alien scientist had predicted they would struggle with basic survival. So far, his predictions were coming true. The second week brought new challenges. A massive ice storm hit the landing site with winds over 300 miles per hour. Ice chunks the size of cars slammed into their temporary shelters. The prefabricated buildings they'd brought from Earth, designed to handle extreme cold, began showing stress fractures after just one storm. Amy worked constantly to repair and modify their equipment. She rigged heating systems using spare parts and improvised insulation from their supply containers. But for every problem she solved, 2 more appeared. Ben discovered that the planet's unique mineral composition interfered with their mining and drilling equipment. The ice contained metal particles that jammed their machines and made the ground even harder to work with. Sophie's medical supplies were running low as she treated cold injuries, equipment-related cuts, and stress-related illnesses. The team was tired, cold, and beginning to doubt themselves. Ryan fought daily battles with their communication system. He managed to maintain sporadic contact with Earth, but it took more effort each day as the equipment continued to suffer from the extreme conditions. On day 10, they received an unexpected transmission. "This is Dr. Vexhari of the Galactic Research Consortium," came the alien's translated voice through their speakers. "I have been monitoring your mission with great interest." The team gathered around Ryan's communication station, surprised to hear from the alien scientist who had predicted their failure. "I want to express what you humans call sympathy for your situation," Vexhari continued. "My calculations show you are experiencing exactly the difficulties I predicted. Equipment failure, environmental challenges, and resource depletion." Jake frowned. "This is Commander Morrison. What exactly do you want, Doctor?" "I want to help," came the reply. "I have arranged for a rescue ship to be positioned near your system. When you are ready to admit that this mission cannot succeed, simply activate your emergency beacon. Evacuation can begin within 3 standard days." The transmission paused, then continued. "I want you to know that there is no shame in retreat. The Zephyrian Empire, with technology far superior to yours, lasted only 6 weeks on a similar world. The Crystalline Collective, naturally adapted to extreme cold, abandoned their settlement after 3 months. You have already exceeded my most optimistic projections for human survival time." Amy looked around at her teammates. Their faces were tired and drawn, marked by the constant cold and stress. Your species shows remarkable determination, Vexari added. But determination alone cannot overcome the laws of physics. This planet will kill you if you remain much longer. Jake keyed the transmitter. Thank you for your concern, Doctor. We'll consider your offer. I will check on your status again in a few days, Vexari replied. I hope you will make the logical choice. After the transmission ended, the team sat in silence. Outside, the wind continued its endless howling. Inside, their breath formed clouds in the cold air, despite their struggling heating systems. Jake looked at each of his team members. They'd come so far, worked so hard, but maybe the alien scientist was right. Maybe some things really were impossible, even for humans. By the fourth week, Amy felt like she was fighting a losing war against the planet itself. Every morning brought new equipment failures. Systems that had worked fine the day before would be frozen solid by dawn. She spent 18 hours a day, making repairs, only to watch them break again within hours. The heating unit is dead again, she told Jake, her voice tired and frustrated. This is the third one this week. The thermal regulators can't handle the temperature swings. When the sun goes down, everything contracts. When it comes up, everything expands. The metal is developing stress fractures. Jake watched Amy work on yet another broken machine. Her hands were constantly cold now, even with the special gloves they brought. Everyone's hands were cold. The portable heaters could only do so much in buildings that weren't designed for temperatures this extreme. Ben had given up trying to use their automated mining equipment. Instead, he spent his days chipping away at the ice with hand tools, trying to gather mineral samples and understand the planet's geology. His progress was measured in inches, not feet. The ice goes down at least 20 feet before I hit actual rock, he reported during their daily briefing. And the mineral composition is nothing like what our scans showed from orbit. There are metal particles mixed throughout the ice that make it incredibly hard. It's like trying to dig through concrete mixed with steel shavings. Sophie's medical. Supplies were running dangerously low. Everyone had suffered from frostbite multiple times. Jake's face still showed scars from his first day outside. Amy had lost feeling in 2 fingertips. Ben had developed a persistent cough from breathing the frigid air. Ryan's shoulders ached constantly from hunching over his equipment in the cold. We're using medical supplies faster than I planned, Sophie admitted privately to Jake. At this rate, we'll be out of frostbite treatment in 2 weeks. And the pain medication is almost gone. Ryan's communication problems had gotten worse each day. The equipment that survived the cold worked only sporadically. His daily reports to Earth were becoming shorter and less frequent. The signal processors keep failing, he explained. I've rebuilt the main transmitter 4 times. Each time, it works for a few hours, then something else breaks. It's like the planet doesn't want us talking to anyone. The breaking point came during the worst storm they'd experienced yet. Jake woke to the sound of metal screaming. Outside, wind speeds had reached over 400 miles per hour. Ice chunks the size of refrigerators slammed into their shelters, with sounds like explosions. The prefabricated buildings groaned and shook under the assault. Everyone get to the main shelter, Jake shouted over the noise. This one has the strongest foundation. They grabbed emergency supplies and ran through the connecting tunnels between buildings. Behind them, they heard the terrible sound of metal tearing. One of their storage buildings collapsed, taking half their spare equipment with it. For 6 hours, they huddled in the main shelter while the storm raged outside. The building shook constantly. Ice formed on the inside walls despite their heaters running at maximum power. They could hear other structures being destroyed, but there was nothing they could do except wait and hope their shelter would hold. When the storm finally passed, they emerged to find half their settlement destroyed. 2 storage buildings were completely gone, twisted metal scattered across the ice. Their workshop had been crushed. The backup power generator was buried under tons of ice and debris. Amy stood looking at the wreckage, her face pale. We've lost about 60% of our spare parts. Most of the backup equipment is gone. The things I need to fix what's left, they're buried under all that ice. Ben kicked at a piece of twisted metal. Our geological equipment was in that storage building. The mineral analysis lab, the core sampling gear, all gone. Sophie checked the remaining supplies. Medical equipment took a big hit too. We're down to basic first aid supplies and maybe a week's worth of medications. Ryan tried to assess the communication damage. The main transmitter array was completely destroyed. I can probably rig something from the backup systems, but it won't have much range. That night, as they sat around their last working heater, Dr. Vex Hari's voice came through their emergency communicator. Commander Morrison, this is Dr. Vex Hari. I have been monitoring the recent storm activity in your area. My sensors indicate significant structural damage to your settlement. Jake picked up the communicator with numb fingers. This is Morrison. We're still here, Doctor. I can see that, Commander. Your survival instincts are ... remarkable. However, I must point out that your situation has become untenable. You have lost most of your equipment. Your supplies are critically low. Another storm like the last one will certainly kill you all. The alien's voice paused, then continued with what sounded like genuine concern. Commander, I am offering you one final opportunity for evacuation. I have a rescue ship standing by just outside your system. If you activate your emergency beacon, within the next 24 hours, they can reach you in 3 days. After that, the orbital mechanics will make rescue much more difficult. Jake looked around at his team. Amy was staring at her broken equipment. Ben was examining mineral samples that might be worthless now. Sophie was counting their remaining medical supplies. Ryan was trying to fix their communicator with spare parts that might not work. This is not about pride or proving a point, Vex Hari continued. This is about survival. The Zephyrian Empire had better technology than you. The Crystalline Collective had natural advantages you lack. Even they knew when to retreat. There is no shame in admitting that some challenges are beyond any species. Capabilities. After the transmission ended, the 5 humans sat in silence. Outside, the wind howled constantly, reminding them that the planet was still trying to kill them. Their heater struggled to keep the small space warm. Everyone's breath was visible in the cold air. Jake finally spoke. We need to make a decision. Do we activate the beacon and go home, or do we keep trying? Amy looked up from the broken equipment spread around her feet. We could vote on it. Ben nodded slowly. Democratic decision. Whatever the majority wants. Sophie wrapped her medical supplies more carefully. It would be the smart thing to do. Medically speaking, we're all at risk of serious cold injury if we stay much longer. Ryan tapped the broken communicator. And we're almost cut off from Earth anyway. If something goes really wrong, no one will even know until it's too late. Jake pulled out 5 pieces of paper from his notebook. All right then, we vote. Right, stay or go, and we'll see what happens. Each team member took a piece of paper and a pencil. They wrote their choices in private, then folded the papers and handed them to Jake outside. Another ice storm was beginning to build. The wind picked up speed, and the first chunks of ice began hitting their shelter. Time was running out, and they all knew it. Jake held the 5 pieces of paper in his hands, knowing that whatever decision they made would change everything. Jake unfolded the first piece of paper and read it silently. Then the second, then the third, fourth, and fifth. He looked up at his team with surprise on his face. Well? Amy asked, rubbing her cold hands together. All 5 votes say stay. Jake announced. The team looked around at each other in amazement. Ben started laughing first, then Sophie joined in. Soon all 5 of them were laughing in their cold, damaged shelter while another ice storm built outside. "We're all crazy," Ryan sighed, still chuckling. "Completely insane." "Probably," Amy agreed. "But we're here now. Might as well make the best of it." Something changed in that moment. Instead of focusing on what was broken, they started looking at what they could build. Instead of seeing impossible problems, they began seeing interesting. Puzzles.Amy was the first to have a breakthrough. While examining the wreckage of their destroyed buildings, she noticed something odd about the ice formations around the debris. "Look at this," she called to the others. "The ice that formed around our metal structures is different. It's denser, harder. The storm winds shaped it into these weird curves, but they're actually really strong." She knocked on one of the ice formations with her tool. It rang like metal. "What if we stop fighting the ice and start working with it?" Amy continued. "Instead of trying to keep our equipment warm, what if we design systems that work in the cold?" Ben crouched down next to her, studying the ice formation. "You know, in Antarctica, some scientists build with compressed snow and ice. It's actually good insulation if you do it right." Amy's eyes lit up. "Exactly. And look at these ice crystals." She pointed to formations that had grown on their metal debris. "They're not random. The wind and temperature created specific patterns. What if we could control that process?" Over the next few days, Amy began experimenting. She took broken pieces of their equipment and let them freeze in controlled ways. She discovered that if she shaped water around metal frames and let it freeze slowly, she could create structures stronger than their original prefabricated buildings. "The key is working with the planet instead of against it," she explained to Jake as she showed him her first successful ice-metal hybrid construction. "Our Earth-made materials keep breaking because they're fighting the environment. But if we use the environment as part of the solution..." Ben made his own discovery while trying to clear debris. He noticed that certain types of ice crystals on Arcturus 7 had unusual properties. "These crystals aren't like regular ice," he told Sophie as they worked together to salvage equipment. "They have metal particles embedded in them, but not randomly. There's a pattern." The planet's magnetic field and extreme temperatures created something new. Ben started collecting different types of ice crystals and testing them. He found that some types provided excellent insulation when layered correctly. Others were incredibly strong when compressed. A few even conducted heat in useful ways. "It's like the planet has been making building materials for us," Ben explained. "We just didn't know how to recognize them." Sophie discovered something important about their medical situation. While treating Ryan's latest case of frostbite, she noticed that wounds actually healed faster in the dry, cold air of Arcturus 7. The bacteria that usually cause infections can't survive in these conditions, she realized, and the cold acts like a natural anesthetic for pain. "We've been thinking of the cold as our enemy, but it's actually helping in some ways." Sophie began developing new treatment methods that used the planet's conditions as advantages rather than obstacles. She created ice packs that lasted for hours and discovered that certain ice crystal formations could be used to purify water more effectively than their mechanical filters. Ryan's breakthrough came when he stopped trying to fix their Earth-made communication equipment and started building something entirely new. "What if we use the ice formations as natural amplifiers?" he asked Jake one evening. "I've noticed that some of these ice structures carry sound really well. Maybe they can carry radio signals too." Ryan began experimenting with ice crystal formations as components in his communication system. He discovered that certain arrangements of crystals could boost signal strength and filter out interference better than their manufactured equipment. "The planet's magnetic field isn't interfering with our signals," Ryan realized. It's trying to help carry them. We just need to learn how to work with it instead of fighting it. But the biggest change wasn't in their technology. It was in how they worked together. Where Dr. Vexhari had predicted panic and conflict, the team found cooperation and humor. When Amy's latest ice-building experiment collapsed, Ben helped her figure out why, while Ryan and Sophie brought hot drinks and bad jokes. When Ben couldn't break through a particularly difficult ice formation, Amy rigged a heating system while Sophie and Ryan took turns with the tools. You know what's funny? Sophie said one evening as they sat around Amy's latest heating invention, a device that used ice crystals to focus and amplify their small heat source. Dr. Vexhari calculated that we'd break down under stress. But working together on impossible problems is actually making us stronger. Jake nodded, watching his team. Amy was sketching plans for a new type of shelter that would use ice as structural support. Ben was sorting crystal samples and explaining their properties to Ryan, who was designing a communication array that would work with the planet's natural features instead of against them. He measured our bodies, our technology, even our psychology. Jake said, but he didn't measure what happens when humans refuse to give up. Ryan looked up from his crystal samples. Should we tell him we're not just surviving, but actually improving our situation? Not yet, Amy said with a grin. Let's surprise him. Outside, another storm was building, but this time it didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like an opportunity. The wind would bring new ice formations to study. The cold would help strengthen Amy's construction experiments. The isolation would give them more time to perfect their innovations. 3 weeks after their vote to stay, their settlement looked completely different. Ice-strengthened buildings that grew stronger in storms rather than weaker. Communication systems that used the planet's natural features. Medical techniques that turned harsh conditions into healing advantages. Mining operations that worked with the ice instead of fighting it. Dr. Vexhari had calculated everything about humans except their refusal to accept that something couldn't be done. He had measured their weaknesses, but missed their greatest strength. When humans couldn't solve a problem the normal way, they invented a new way, and they were just getting started. 6 months after Jake's team had voted to stay, Dr. Vexhari's shuttle descended through Arcturus 7's atmosphere toward what should have been an empty landing site. Instead, his instruments showed a thriving settlement with multiple buildings, power signatures, and active communication arrays. This cannot be correct, Vexhari muttered to himself, checking his readings again. My calculations were precise. They should have evacuated months ago. As his shuttle broke through the cloud layer, Vexhari saw something that made his eyes widen in disbelief. The human settlement had not just survived, it had grown. Elegant structures that seemed to blend ice and metal rose from the frozen ground. Thermal signatures showed buildings that were actually staying warm in the deadly cold. Communication towers made from crystalline formations reached toward the sky. But most shocking of all, there were 3 other ships parked near the human settlement. Ships from different alien species. Vexhari landed his shuttle and was met by Commander Morrison, who looked healthier and more confident than he had 6 months ago. The human was wearing clothes that seemed perfectly suited to the extreme cold, and he was smiling. Welcome to New Hope Station, Dr. Vexhari, Jake said. We've been expecting you. Expecting me? Vexhari asked, still trying to understand what he was seeing. Amy figured you'd want to study how we survived. She's excited to show you what we've built. As they walked toward the main settlement, Vexhari saw humans working outside in the deadly cold, moving easily and efficiently. Their equipment was unlike anything he had seen before, tools and machines that seemed designed specifically for this frozen world. How are you not dead? Vexhari asked bluntly. Jake laughed, a sound that seemed out of place on this deadly planet. Turns out we're harder to kill than your calculations suggested. Inside the main building, Bexhari met the rest of the team. Amy was showing two Zephyrian engineers her ice construction techniques. Ben was explaining mineral extraction methods to a crystalline collective scientist. Sophie was teaching cold weather medical procedures to a group of alien medical officers. Ryan was helping technicians from 3 different species improve their communication systems. "I don't understand," Bexhari said to Jake. "These other species, they failed on similar planets. Why are they here?" "They came to learn," Jake explained. "Turns out our techniques work for them too, with some modifications. The Zephyrians are using Amy's ice-building methods on their home world now. The Crystalline Collective wants to hire Ben to help with their mining operations. Sophie's cold weather medical techniques are being adapted for use on dozens of ice planets." Amy approached them, her face glowing with excitement. "Dr. Bexhari, perfect timing. I just finished the new thermal regulation system. Want to see how it works?" Before he could answer, Amy was leading him to a wall covered with what looked like crystalline formations growing in precise patterns. "These aren't decorations," Amy explained. "They're living heat distributors. The ice crystals on this planet aren't just frozen water. They're complex crystalline structures that can store and move thermal energy. We learned to cultivate them and guide their growth." Bexhari examined the wall closely. The crystals were indeed alive in a sense, growing and changing as they managed heat flow throughout the building. "But this is impossible," Bexhari said. "My analysis showed that humans lacked the biological adaptations necessary for extreme cold survival." Ben joined them, holding samples of different crystal types. "You were right about our biology, Doc. We can't survive here the way we evolved. So we stopped trying to survive here as Earth humans and started becoming Arcturus humans instead." "Becoming what?" Sophie appeared with a medical scanner. "We've all adapted, physically and mentally. Our lung capacity has increased for the thin air. Our circulation has improved for the cold. Our problem-solving skills have gotten sharper because we face new challenges every day." Ryan walked over with a communication device that looked like it was grown rather than built. "And we've learned to think like the planet thinks. Instead of imposing our technology on this world, we're working with its natural systems." Bexhari spent 3 days studying the human settlement. Everything he observed contradicted his original calculations. The humans hadn't just survived. They had evolved their entire approach to living on ice planets. On his final day, Bexhari watched Jake's team teaching survival techniques to a group of young alien scientists who had come to study human methods. The humans were patient teachers, sharing their knowledge freely and adapting their techniques for different alien biologies. "Why do you help them?" Bexhari asked Jake as they watched Amy demonstrate ice-building techniques to a fascinated Zephyrian. "Engineer, these species competed with you for territorial claims. Some voted against human membership in the Galactic Council." Jake shrugged. "Because they asked for help. And because these techniques work better when more people understand them." Sophie discovered that teaching others actually helps us learn new applications we hadn't thought of. That evening, Bexhari sat in his shuttle preparing his report to the Galactic Research Consortium. For the first time in his scientific career, he had to admit that his calculations had been completely wrong. But more than that, he had to explain why they had been wrong. "The humans did not survive Arcturus 7 through superior technology," he wrote. "Their equipment failed as predicted. They did not survive through biological advantages. Their bodies are indeed poorly adapted for extreme cold as calculated." Bexhari paused, trying to find the right words. "They survived through a characteristic that cannot be measured or predicted: their refusal to accept that survival is impossible. When their original methods failed, they invented new methods. When their equipment broke, they built better equipment. When the planet's conditions seemed deadly, they found ways to make those same conditions helpful. He saved his official report and opened his personal log. I measured human technology, biology, and psychology, he recorded privately. I calculated their equipment failure rates, their physical limitations, and their stress responses. I predicted exactly how they would fail. Vexhari looked out his shuttle window at the thriving human settlement, lit up against the dark, frozen landscape. But I failed to measure their most dangerous characteristic. Humans do not calculate when they should give up. Where other species see impossible odds, humans see interesting problems. Where logic says retreat, human stubbornness says try harder. He paused the recording and watched Amy and Ben working outside in the deadly cold, laughing about something as they installed another piece of ice crystal technology. I thought I was studying a soft, weak species that would break under pressure, Vexhari continued. Instead, I discovered that humans become more creative, more cooperative, and more determined precisely when the situation becomes impossible. They do not just adapt to survive, they adapt to thrive. Vexhari finished his log entry and prepared to depart. Tomorrow, he would present his findings to the Galactic Council. He would recommend that other species study human techniques for ice planet colonization. He would suggest that the definition of impossible needed to be reconsidered when humans were involved. But tonight, he simply marveled at his own blindness. He had calculated everything about humans, except the one thing that mattered most: their complete inability to understand when they were supposed to lose Dot as his shuttle lifted off from New Hope Station. Vexhari could see the lights of the human settlement growing brighter in the darkness. Soon, other species would build settlements, here using human techniques. Other worlds would be colonized using methods that Jake's team had invented. And somewhere in the galaxy, humans were probably looking at another impossible planet and making plans to prove everyone wrong again.